Serious, ladies, what's the creepiest thing a guy has done that was meant to be romantic? A guy told me that he had killed 2 people and dumped their bodies in the lake. He was psycho and thought that somehow that would be cool or mysterious and would impress me. He offered to take me to the spot in the lake and show me. I called the cops on him. He was pissed and said he made it up and I shouldn't have overreacted. I don't really know what he was expecting. An ex wrote to me in blood once. No joke. Very creepy. I was flirting with a guy in a club. We talked all night and finally kissed. He was awesome and really hot. Then he told me to close my eyes and he put a silver necklace with a cross around my neck. I looked at it and said, thanks. ? He smiled and said, it belonged to my first girlfriend. She died in a house fire when I was 15. 2 weeks after meeting, he wanted to get my name tatted on him. I noped out real quick. Ex-boyfriend thought sending me a leopard print thong in the mail was charming, but he didn't want to be a creep, so he sent it anonymously. And I opened it in front of my parents. I actually think that's hilarious. I would have laughed it off if it hadn't been for my overprotective dad having seen it tongue, but honestly we needed to stop talking after that because we hadn't been a couple for a year. When I was like 16, a 25-year-old tried to get with me. We knew each other through barbershop quartet programs, and since it is a small group of people, most of them add each other on Facebook and talk often. Well, this guy added me and immediately began to flirt with me. He'd always call me cutie or tell me how sexy I looked in pictures followed by ;D. I had a boyfriend at the time, so I tried to respond by talking about my boyfriend rather than making a scene since I was still involved in the barbershop community. Anyway, one day he decided to tell me how my boyfriend didn't seem worthy of me, then followed it up with the fact that he masturbated to pictures of me. When I didn't respond, he said we all do it. I'm just a little lonely. I blocked him after that. I've seen other guys do that. Tell a woman they masturbate to an image of the woman. That's like stamping yourself on the head with a creep stamp. I had an ex-boyfriend who began stalking me after I broke up with him. He'd wait outside for me, park his truck behind my car so I couldn't leave creepy notes on my car, stand outside my basement door looking in, etc. All because he said I loved him and we belonged together, but I just didn't know it yet. Lasted almost a year after we broke up until I had to almost get the cops involved. Skeptical. We have the same ex. And I did get the cops involved after he took my phone and locked me in my bathroom. He wouldn't let me out until I told him I loved him back, which took 3 hours. I immediately ran out of the house to the police. He is a high school teacher. He was a budding animator who had a crush on me. As a romantic gesture to win me over, he created an anthropomorphic sexy squirrel character based on me and drew several very detailed and graphic pin-up type pictures of it and uploaded them to his online portfolio. He was a pretty skilled artist and the face of the character was noticeably me. He said it was how he saw me in his fantasies. Oh my god, my boyfriend did something similar. He went through a phase of calling me his little rabbit, which I initially took offense to because I thought he was teasing me about my prominent front teeth. Then once at his house I noticed some drawings lying on the floor in his room, one of which was me drawn in the form of a pin-up style rabbit with my name scribbled beside it several times. I have to admit, it was drawn really well and I didn't know he could draw like that, but I was so weirded out. Broke into my house, left an engagement ring on my bed and a note saying how he'd masturbated in my sheets because they smelled like me. This was all after I broke up with him. The morning after our first date, sent me a picture of a guy going down on a woman, and said his first thought this morning was doing that to me. Later the same day he texted me saying he was falling in love with me. And that was the end of the shortest relationship I've ever had. Gave me stolen underwear and cheap jewelry a couple of hours after we'd met. This guy also asked me when he could put a baby in me and confessed his love for me. One of the weirdest nights of my life. Edit. I thought I'd add a few more details for those who are interested. They may sound unbelievable, but I promise you on my mother's life that all of this is true. He told me he was 23 when we met, and by the time I got away he was 33. Keep in mind that I was 17 at the time. He told me to climb in the window of his house when I arrived. He was right there and I was already weirded out, plus I have some issues, so I agreed with much trepidation. His best friend, who was also one of his housemates at the time, now lives right down the road from me and is visited by creep number 1 regularly. After I got away I texted him and told him never to talk to me again. He then demanded all his gifts back or he would call the cops and tell them you sold my stuff. I said okay. If he gave me a place to drop them off I would have my parents do it. He refused this and insisted that I meet him. It didn't happen. He continued to message me and leave me voice messages until I got a new phone 6 months later. There are more where those came from if anyone wants to hear more about it. Smile. Well. When. Edited. Damn. I only just got the joke. So fucking slow today, haha. To answer your question, I would rather have babies with a talking potato because they're almost guaranteed to be a better father than you. Met me on the train, says Hess related to a rugby player. The resemblance is there so I believe him, and tries to ask me out thinking I like rugby players' cousins. Half an hour later, when I'm waiting for my friend to get money out, he tries to surprise me with a quick kiss, covered my mouth and also tried to slip in the tongue. Then goes for the boob grab, holding me close to him with a really strong arm. My friend grabbed him and kneed him in the stomach when I finally got his gross mouth off me, yelling for help. Followed me to the bathroom at a party because he just wanted to help me. When I confronted him outside in front of the party host, he said, "I think I'm in love with you." I had just met him that night. I let my ex take a photo of me going down on him. He posted it on a social media website because he wanted everyone to see how amazing I was. Holy hell. I gave a guy a ride home once and went inside so I could use his bathroom before I headed home myself. When I came out of the bathroom, he was on the couch with his pants to his knees smoking one of those skinny cigars. He was just like, "Sup." I left quickly. When I started seeing my now husband, I had a friend who was very upset he hadn't asked me out first. He kept asking me to go out with him instead, that he'd make a much better partner. I should have shut it down harder, but I was 18 and the more insistent he got, the more scared I was. I was worried I was blowing it out of proportion. He kept coming into my work to talk when he knew I couldn't leave or be rude to him as a customer. It escalated until he texted me in the middle of the night to tell me he'd slit his wrists because I wouldn't go out with him and was smearing it all over the walls. Why was I hurting him so much? Couldn't I see he was the one for me? To him it was a grand declaration of love. I was terrified. I stopped replying at all after that. I thought he would come after me. I had to get my managers and security involved to stop him coming in to see me, and a few months later he moved away and got another girl pregnant. I should have gone to the police, but it honestly didn't occur to me at the time. I thought they'd just dismiss it as no big deal. I hope this never happens again. But if you ever get told that someone slit their wrists, you can actually call the police and they will put the person on a 72-hour psychiatric hold, US, for evaluation. Might be helpful in cases like this. I think ideally they also have to send an emergency psych team, basically cops who are trained to evaluate and handle suicidal or mentally unstable people they are called on. This theoretically prevents trigger-happy or inexperienced cops from escalating a diffusable situation. Whether they do is another story. But the mandatory psych hold is definitely something anyone here should think about if someone is seriously threatening suicide or is making you think they might seriously be a danger to themselves or others. It's a good wake-up call if the person was not serious, and a potential avenue for help if they have any underlying issues. It's also helpful if the person threatening suicide is doing it as a stalkery manipulation tactic, because it's something that can be used to build a case for a restraining order or police intervention. Also, if someone is doing these sorts of things to you and leaving evidence like voicemail, texts, FB messages, saving them is really not a bad idea. Snuck into my apartment building after going on one date, taped a flower and a love poem to my door. Now this might have been cute because the start of the poem was all joking around and goofy. But then the second half of the poem was all weird and "you and I are gonna be together forever and have 10 babies" kinda shit. You don't pull that shit after one date. WTF? He proposed to me on the first date. Had a ring and everything. The restaurant was chock full of people to be all, "Ah, young love." Pictures were taken. Obviously I said no. I didn't even know this guy's middle name. And he was so nervous just talking to me I was halfway assuming he was on some kind of weird twitchy drug. A few years later he sent me a text. He mentioned a girlfriend, which lulled me into a sense of security. Plus I'm a pretty polite idiot. So I responded, pointedly mentioned my boyfriend just in case. Anyway, he said we should grab coffee while he was in town visiting family and I agreed. Polite idiot. He proposed again. It was a different ring. Part of me wonders if he just picks a girl once a week and gives it a shot. I still don't know his middle name. You've made me nervous that I don't know my husband's middle name. Thomas. Maybe? Maybe. We didn't know each other's middle names when we got married. I forgot to ask. My teacher asked me out on the last day of class. We were both in our mid-20s. We went out and after a few drinks he admitted to jerking off to my Facebook pictures. I ended up spending the night anyway, and the next day he texted me how nice it was to find my hair in the shower. That story was a roller coaster of emotions. Greater than I ended up spending the night anyway this. He left a bag with a live snake in it tied to my car antenna while it was parked in my high school's parking lot. I got a restraining order. How is that supposed to be romantic? He was the security guard for the mall I worked in. He used to just stand in front of my store. Didn't really stare but would look in from time to time. One night a customer started trying to open our gates after we had just closed. I already finished closing my till so I couldn't process another sale until the next morning. This guy loses it and starts getting violent with the door trying to get inside. Creepy security guard to the rescue. He dragged the customer out of the mall. Turns out he got arrested later that evening. Security guard swoops in and says that was scary. Are you okay? Would you like to go for a walk and grab a coffee with me? Take your mind off things? Smooth as fuck. And he was decently attractive. Didn't give off creepy mofo vibes. I agreed. We spent all evening walking downtown. We went to a record store where he picked up a few things, and I pointed out a CD that had a pretty cover. I only knew one song from it. I think it was an MXPX CD. Then we went past a Le Chateau, and I pointed out a pretty prom dress in the window. I thought it was nice, didn't think anything of it, just commenting. He walks me home, gives me a kiss on the cheek, and that was that. He was a gentleman, and was very sweet, didn't expect anything from me. I had a wonderful time and was excited for date 2. The next day he wasn't working, but as I was leaving my store a random guy came up and said this is from your biggest fan. And handed me the MXPX CD from the night before. Odd, but a cute gesture. It wasn't expensive, maybe he was just trying to make me smile? Anyway, I thanked the stranger, and went home. The day after that I still didn't see him, and took my lunch break. When I returned my manager asked me if I was still in high school, because there was a prom dress that had been delivered to me while I was out. My heart sunk. I was creeped out. The dress was like $300 minimum. I felt sick. I had to find him and tell him to reel it back. He was freaking me out. On my way home that night, I see him standing under the streetlight in the distance in front of my flat. Hess holding roses and wearing a suit. Oh God no. I thought, but at least now I can talk to him. Before I can even open my mouth, he hands me roses, gets down on one knee, and asks me to marry him. I obviously say no, and start to explain myself, when he interrupts me. What do you mean no? Didn't you accept my gifts? What are you, a gold-digging whore? And that's when I ran into my building and never looked back. I quit my job the next day and moved 2 months later. Never saw him again. TL, DR, security guard seems amazing on first date, then drops $300 minimum on gifts and then proposes. And upon refusal gets aggressive. Quit my job. Drawn a pie chart of all the girls he likes and tried to convince me to go on a date with him since I was 32% of the pie.